Hey everybody, this is Off the Cuff with T and me. I'm Carol, that's Tanya. We're so happy that you're tuned in today, and we are talking about language. We're talking about the importance of the words that come out of our mouth. Have you ever heard somebody say, don't forget to take that, don't forget to do this, don't forget? What do you think happens when we use that word forget? I personally think, Tanya tends to agree with me, that we focus on the forget. We're reinforcing that forget word. We are not remembering, we are forgetting. It seems like a bit of a weird thing. It's so common practice. A few years ago, well, actually, more than a few years ago, Tanya would often describe her situation. She would open a sentence with, I'm struggling to see, I'm struggling to find, I'm struggling this. And I'd be like, stop struggling, but stop using that word. To me, it just seems really, really simple. But this isn't something that we get taught, folks. Now, Tanya no longer uses that I'm struggling. That's not a piece. Here's a few other examples that you might remember. I don't want to. Oh, okay. So now you don't want. You're still focusing on what we don't want. Um, I can't afford it. I don't have enough time.
Yeah, those are the culprits, right? Not enough time, not enough money, not enough energy. And we tend to rely on these things getting us out of, even if it's something we desire, right? Convincing ourselves that we can't because.
Yeah.
And I mean, and as someone who's lived limited by my own thoughts for a very long time, and now breaking out of those limitations and coming to understand things at a more profound level, this idea of language is very important. The I statements,
Yeah.
I this instead of you. When I'm talking about myself, I would, constantly hear people talking in you language. And I'm like,
Yeah,
well,
when you do
about
this,
me or
blah blah
you?
blah. And I'm like, no, I don't know that at all.
And catching myself way more often these days. So it's the consciousness, right? The level of consciousness around when I start to say something like, I don't want, why is this happening? The energy around that, right? The resistance that comes up that's in my mind and in my body. And I'm like, oh, I'm willing it to be different, even though it's not different. And
Right?
and and so I had an experience of that the other day when I was driving. Development in Vancouver has been something that is a source of a contention for me. Has been. What I'm noticing is that I immediately, because I've been practicing this piece of bringing in what I do want and calling in what I do want and understanding that I have the power to do so, instead of being angry that the development is happening. So I immediately, I could feel it. It was coming up from my toes. My blood started boiling and I started going, and I was about to shoot off all of this stuff around, why does this have to be happening? And why does development have to be happening? And there's homeless and blah, all that stuff. The blitz of what I'm angry about and in resistance to, although the building is clearly there, they've blueprinted it, there are people building it, it's a job for someone, right? Like me being angry driving down the road about it isn't going to stop it. So I immediately was able to shift into the, oh, right, okay, and then using the power of calling things in and going, oh, and talking to myself, because it's really easy to do with other people, I find, but talking to myself sometimes is not always easy. But I literally looked into the rearview mirror and said, oh, T, do you remember? Do you remember all the development that you were a part of? Where we got to build houses for each person and the seniors were taken care of and the unhoused were taken care of. Do you remember that? And the energy shifted immediately into the power of positivity, and the energy in my body was different. I could feel the difference.
Well,
And that was just the
you're
language.
aligned with your highest self in that space, right?
Yeah. And I think language quite often, I mean, look at marketing. If
Oh
you,
my
you look at
gosh.
any kind of advertising, it constantly is saying, don't forget the milk.
Yep.
Don't forget this, don't forget that. And here's the thing is, I learned many years ago, the universe actually does not hear don't, not, and no. It doesn't have a, first of all, it doesn't have a comprehension of those things, right? So all it hears is forget, forget, forget,
Mm.
forget. And immediately we then go, oh, how did I forget that? Because I trained myself to forget it.
Yes.
And it's simple. It's don't forget to please remember.
Right? This happens in school all the time. I mean, how many times a day does a teacher in our like I'm sure. I mean, it was part of the school system when I was in school. Now that granted that's a number of years ago. Um wow.
Yeah, don't forget your homework.
How early? Don't forget to wash behind your ears.
Don't
Don't
forget to wash your hands.
Oh man. There's I'm thinking about childhood and like, messages about things, like messages from money. So my, one of my earliest messages about money from my family was money is dirty,
Same.
right? Like it's dirty. You go touching that money, go wash your hands. It's dirty.
Who wants to touch that? And of course, it creates this repulsion.
It
Right?
does.
I mean, that was the message was it's repulsive. Don't touch that. It's no wonder there's been limitations, right?
It's amazing. And when we start thinking about all these little things that happened so long ago, thinking that maybe that was inconsequential, the fact is that that energy has been carrying along with me. There's not a time when I've touched pennies that I haven't washed my hands. And it does stink.
Yeah.
It is dirty. And now it's like, it's become such a like, well, no, pennies are almost extinct now here. Like no one's dealing with pennies anymore. But that idea was so
Ingrained.
bred into me from such a young age. So, and then I had to train myself into money comes easily and frequently. Right? Money is energy. I haven't been doing the money. Like we've changed our money as plastic now. So it's different. But I remember even when, anyway, that's different
The conditioning, right? Talking about the conditioning and the language that we use or is used with us or for us or on us, right? In these teachings that then become our indoctrined way of thinking. And so, again, coming to even traffic, right? So I can be enlightened while I'm in my four walls. It's very easy, but I get into traffic and all of a sudden, I'm upset or angry at that person for doing that thing. And so the other day I had to remind myself every 2 minutes, right? You're in traffic. It is the way it is. You have zero control over what that looks like. And what could you choose right now? Right? Joy and harmony, peaceful feelings instead of this, why is this happening? And why can't I get around this? And I don't want this to be happening. And traffic is one of those things, I think, for many people, right? We get caught up in the, why is that guy cutting me off? Well, maybe that guy is cutting you off so that something else doesn't happen down the road. Like we don't actually know the reason.
That's right.
But getting into trust in that moment that reason is for my greatest good is a better way to live than the why can't I push water uphill? Why isn't that door of opportunity opening for me? I've been knocking for the longest time. What I have come to understand is that not all doors are meant to open in the moment that I think they should. True. And sometimes I'm ramming myself up against a brick wall so often because I've missed that I need to turn right.
Yeah. I have a very close person in my life who used to call me with road rage. Oh, I can't believe this. Blah, 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 and I just decides to just stay living in the moment of frustration and like with themselves, but also now bringing me into the mix. And at some point I was like, why are you sharing this with me? What's the intention of you bringing this into my, well, people are stupid or blah blah, whatever the story was at the time. You being angry about that and holding this energy isn't going to change. That driver has no idea that you're mad. You're reliving this. You're now bringing me into this. How are all of these words moving any of us forward in this moment?
And it's remembering that the vibration that I'm sending off is the vibration that's being met, right? There's no person in the sky going, okay, well, she's been good enough, so therefore I'm going to send her good things, right? It literally is a vibrational match, right? It's a law.
Yeah.
And therefore it is all the time. It's never not on. And me remembering to shift my energy, it's the same thing, right? So I could be frustrated and spew off a bunch of stuff about the building and the everything that's going on in Vancouver around housing, and or I could get in the driver's seat and say, okay, so how can I utilize this energy to create more of what I do want?
Right. And
It
there
is.
sometimes there's reasons for these things. Like there are reasons. I remember in a program I took once with Jim Sorensen told this story about how there was a man and his toddler on public transit. And the toddler was out of control, and the father seemingly did nothing about it, wasn't really doing anything. And finally, another passenger spoke up and said, "Do you mind getting your child under control, please?" And the father just looked to that person and said, "I know, I'm really sorry. They haven't been the same since their mother passed away."
Mhm.
You know, it's possible that that person didn't signal because their lights out and they weren't aware of it. It's possible that they're distracted because they just lost somebody in their family. There are infinite number of possibilities.
So true.
And the practice is for us to just breathe in and not get attached to it. I do. I'm guilty of this myself. I live in an area where we have literally one road that goes through the whole area, and the speed limit is 80 most of the time. Some people they just want to go 60, and it is some days are super maddening. And then I remember, well, I'm on my day off. I'm not in a hurry. I don't have to be anywhere. And the truth is that if I were to go the speed limit, I'm gonna land where I'm going about 2.5 minutes sooner than I am now. Like, really, what's the big deal? And
Well,
so,
control, right? The wanting to control the situation and the outcome, and you're in my way of doing that. Whereas when we can flip it, okay, you're in my way, maybe so I can slow down,
maybe so I can slow down.
right? Maybe so I can slow down, maybe so that I can notice something instead of this, it reminds me of Cruella de Vil, like on this war path towards what it is that we say that we want, yet we're not actually taking the time to smell the roses, so to speak, and
Yeah.
and some of those opportunities that feel like a mistake in the moment, they feel like, no, this shouldn't be happening, I
Yeah.
want this to
This
be
is wrong.
different,
Yeah.
why is this wrong?
Resisting what is.
And how futile it is. Resistance is futile, and uh my dad's favorite saying, one of them, was resist not, right? And I remember like that enraging. I'm like, I'll show you resistance already. And then coming, years later after he passed away, coming to the magic chuckle, the universe's magic chuckle, because ultimately, when I can shift my state into just being okay, just being in the moment, and just accepting things as they are, not as I think they should be. And how often do we get going in a direction and we're going, towards this directed whatever it is that we want, and it doesn't look exactly the way that we've mapped it out, so we're upset.
Yeah.
And we're in resistance to that. Meanwhile, the confusion then becomes well, I thought you said you wanted this. Just
Yeah.
because it doesn't come in the exact flavor, the exact direction, the exact package, whatever the thought that we think it should, quite often when we actually surrender into those places, it's something even better.
That's true. Have you ever had something happen that initially seemed like, oh boy, this isn't going to be so good? And maybe it was hurtful and maybe it was a horrible experience, but out of that came something absolutely magic when you are now able to look back and go, wow, I can see that that happened for a reason.
Yeah.
I've
My
had a
whole
lot,
childhood.
pretty
My whole
much.
childhood.
And so when we're, yeah, so well, let's go back to some of the language specifically. So, the don't forget piece. So instead of saying don't forget, what do we say? Remember.
Please
That seems
remember.
obvious, right? And now the other thing to remember, I guess, is that there's a much bigger picture, a much bigger game that's being played. And often when we get caught up in these little details, it is just the little details. It's like I'm I'm caught up in this little moment here and now. When I can zoom out from that and take a look at the bigger picture and see and remember what I'm aligned with, what am I working towards, what are my biggest, deepest dreams, goals, and desires right now. If I'm aligned to my deepest dreams, goals, and desires, then it shouldn't really matter what's going on around me here because I'm still sticking to that goalpost. I know
Right.
where I'm going, I know where I'm heading. This is just on my way. It's not part of something that's going to stop me, it's just on my way. So remembering why we're here, what our biggest goal is, I think is going to help us stay anchored in the positive reinforcement of some of these things when they go sideways. So remember is a much better way to phrase don't forget. Like energetically, it just feels different. Say it to yourself out loud. Like it feels different when you just say
Remember,
that.
please remember.
Yeah, it's
Please remember,
amazing.
we are literally in infinite possibilities all the time. And it
Yes,
is our limited human experience and our histories that usually hold us back from seeing that, right?
absolutely.
And when I can actually be that for fleeting moments at this point in time, but it's the practice of remembering that, right?
Yeah.
And catching myself so much more quickly than I used to, right? It used to maybe take days or months or years to happen. Now it's moments, it's seconds. But that's because there's been also an immersion, a practice for many years of remembering, right?
Mhm.
And speaking from I language, I feel, as opposed to you did this.
Yeah. Ownership language is so powerful. It's so powerful. And
Right.
thoughts become things. Thoughts become things. Mike Dooley, thoughts become things. And thoughts become our words that reinforce the things that are already going to happen. So our words, even the thoughts we choose are really important. So even if you are thinking, don't forget. Guess
Mhm.
what?
Mhm.
Chances are you're going to forget.
Yep.
I mean, we have these little devices now. We get to program in, oh, I got an appointment that helps us remember. But
Mhm.
even just using the word, just if you can just try using the word remember, replacing that with that other word that we're not even going to talk about for the rest of the session now. Okay. That's your homework. You're getting homework today.
Well, and catch yourself. How
Yeah.
often do you catch yourself? And is it quicker? Are you noticing the quickness of that, right?
Yeah.
Because we can also get into that place of, oh, there I am again, and then
No,
that
yeah, no beating yourself up.
crappy
No.
committee, right?
Yep.
That thing on my shoulder that tells me that I'm never gonna get it and it's always gonna be wrong. And I mean, there's other language,
Be
right?
compassionate. I just said that.
Absolutely.
Did you guys notice? I said no beating yourself up. That's negative. What am I reinforcing here? So be compassionate with yourself. Love
Right.
yourself through the learning.
Mhm. Yeah, and love all of it because some of it will feel sticky and messy and hard sometimes. And I do know historically, I have lots of evidence to support the fact that at some point in time, something that looks like one thing can actually be the transformational piece
Yeah,
in how I can transform it into looking like something else. And accepting it in that way. So, and celebrating it really, like
celebrate.
celebrating the discovery, celebrating these things that are happening around me instead of being in resistance to it. I don't like that at work. Okay, well, what do I like? Right?
Focusing on what we want as opposed to what we
Absolutely.
don't.
And catching
And
ourselves.
that
It's the practice of that's the
totally.
moment.
And Tanya and I, we're part of this other group right now, and the homework for the last week on this other group was the hope. I can't say that word.
Hope, Ho'opono
Y'all know that prayer.
prayer.
Thank you. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. I love you. So remembering those words and bringing that into our experience as we're learning and catching ourselves in our own awareness about our language, about our thoughts, it's pretty powerful stuff. You can manifest a lot of stuff with your thoughts, and it can be good. It can work towards you and align with your long-term goals, or it can do the opposite.
Absolutely. And that goes back to the power really does reside within.
It does.
Yeah.
Oh, this is so juicy, you guys. This is so great. There's so much. We're probably gonna end up building a workshop out of this because there's so much juice in here. We've got some really amazing ideas. So look forward to some events that are gonna come out of this. This is just a little touching of the surface because it's something that we hear all the time and wanted to just bring it to your awareness in case you hadn't noticed it yet. So if you're noticing it now, bravo, amazing. Share your comments below. We want to hear how this new way of addressing your own thoughts is working for you. Thank you so much for stopping by. T, did you have anything you wanted to wrap up today?
Just on the last note of I am not my thoughts. I am the
Are you?
watcher of my
I
thoughts.
am the watcher of my thoughts.
I'm the consciousness that watches those thoughts. And when I can separate myself and give the distance, I can come to the understanding, I can be compassionate, I can be graceful with self. The practice. Happy practicing, my friends. See you next time off the cuff with T and me. Bye.
So good to see you.